All righty. Well, again, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are located. We're going to get started with our lunch and learn today for Proven Call Center Intake and Dispatch Made Simple. Today, I brought a special guest with me for my lunch and learn. That is Christy Ragon. She's going to be helping me out today, showcase the new call center functionality. And as we get started, I just want to go through a couple of key housekeeping items for those of you that are new to the Lunch and Learn program. All of our Lunch and Learns are recorded, so copies will be provided through our help library as well as our online YouTube channel. Through Zoom, we will do all of our webinar Lunch and Learn series, and this will allow for anyone who's viewing our webinar today to put any sort of questions and comments in the chat box throughout the course of the presentation. We will not be stopping to answer questions during the presentation, but we will leave time at the end for any Q&A. And of course, if we run out of time, because we only have about 30 minutes today to go through the question and answer, then I'll make sure that those questions get addressed offline. So getting started, we're going to break down our course agenda for today, and I've really broken it down into 6 main groupings. The call center, which is part of the Proven CRM application, has a whole bunch of new settings that are built in that allow companies to really define their automated workflow for incoming calls that are coming into their office. We're going to take a look at the company setup options that have been added into CRM that allows us to assign follow me numbers, as well as set up automated attendance. We'll take a look at our location settings and service regions that are going to be playing a critical part in our intake and dispatch. We'll take a look at the attendance setup and really drill into the defining of our hours of operations and automated workflow. There's a number of settings that have been put in for callers to be prompted through an automated message and number select that'll give us a number of different options to choose from when creating these different workflows for our regular business hours of operation, as well as the ability to come in here and define things like after hours calls and on-call help that we can then go in and define in the system. In here, our employee setup really pertains to our users and who's going to be set up as a call agent in the system to be able to intake and transfer calls that are coming into our office, as well as how we assign on-call employees in the system that will then allow us to have them show up in our on-call display menu, which we can then either email, text message, or call to then do either a warm transfer or a notification that'll go directly to the person who's going to be taking that service call for us. And then we're going to set aside some time to actually do a live call intake where I'll have Christy call into our office. We'll be able to identify whether or not this client already exists in our database. If they do, it allows us to quickly and easily access their history. And if they don't exist, it'll allow us to create them on the fly. As well as through the intake process, we'll talk about service area suggestions, as well as the customization of our intake form. Through this process, we'll also be going through and showing how that dispatch alert can be going into our technician's mobile device, verifying who's on call for our staff, as well as how that transfer then can go into the proven job system and allow us to run those alerts through on site to keep our customer up to date, communications and audit trail so that we can prove all of the things that happened from the minute that call came in until we've actually completed that service call for the day. And then we'll monitor the new call dashboard that's now available in the CRM that helps us monitor all incoming and outgoing traffic to our office. It allows us to take a look at things like our answer ratio and job conversion ratio, as well as being able to monitor all call recordings in the system so that we can go back and, for quality assurance purposes, go through and see how those conversations transpired. So without further ado, let's get started on the company setup, the first thing we're going to take a look at is the new company setup screens. And we're going to be looking at three key areas of our company setup: numbers, attendance, and regions. And so in here, I'm going to just quickly jump into our company settings from my call center dashboard. So I'm just going to jump really quickly into my CRM profile. I have the new call center turned on. So you can see in here, it has the little phone icons in here where I can actually receive calls or even make phone calls directly from within the application. If we navigate to our company settings, you will find all of the call center settings now underneath the office section of our location. And when I come into my office section in here, you'll see the new call center menu option showing down here at the bottom that allow us to now configure the call center for our office. And in here, kind of like we were showing back on the previous slide, it's made up of three components that we need to make sure are set up before we can start to intake calls into our office. The first one is the numbers. Now, we are going to be using Twilio numbers in order to intake these calls into your office. Now, what this means is that either we can purchase these numbers on your behalf, or if you have existing Twilio numbers that you're using, we can get those connected into the system. And this will allow for any existing or established numbers that you may already have in place, like an office number or cell phone number, that as long as those numbers can be forwarded to our Twilio number, our system will be able to intercept that phone call. So now we can record where the call came from. We can record, again, the origin of the call. So for a lot of companies who may have different numbers that are established, you can have as many numbers as you want listed in your call center application. And these numbers can be tied to different marketing opportunities. Maybe we have one number on our website, another number that's showing on our Google Ads, and maybe even another number that we have for promotion or things that we send out through printed articles, so that based on the number that's being called in, we'll know where that call originated from. So that'll give us an opportunity again in the system to see all that information directly from within the call center itself. The next piece we want to take a look at inside of our numbers. So once we've established in the system, we want to make sure that that number is capable of both voice and text message sending, as well as that all calls that are coming in, by default, we have them checked off for recordings, so that now we'll have copies of those phone conversations that we can review back in our system. Now in here, when it comes to languages, this allows us to change the automated attendant from a standpoint of how these, when the calls are coming in, the language that that user will receive. So if I wanted to set up a French line versus an English line or Spanish line, I can come in here and have different numbers connected to different languages, as well as our attendants, which for the sake of this demo, I have both a woman's voice and a man's voice. But on our Twilio settings, there's about 50 different voices to choose from as far as the automated attendant who's answering. And then we have the ability that once this number picks up, depending on when the caller is calling in, we can either have a greeting message set up that during business hours, we have a single message that's answered as soon as this call is intercepted. We can have an outside business hours message, which could be something like an after hours handoff or a forwarding to an after hours call center. And if nobody is available and it needs to go directly to voicemail, we can have a voicemail message as well that's established within the organization. And these are all editable per each number that we have set up within the system. Now, in here, once we have our numbers set up, the next thing that we want to take a look at is creating an automated attendant. And as I mentioned, in here, there's a couple of different areas that we want to go to set up first. In here, when we establish our company, we want to define our hours of operation. So by coming in here and clicking our new record, what it brings up is an ability to come in here and establish different days and times that we want to have set up for our automated attendant. This could be defining our regular business hours. This could be defining an after-hours service or different workflow for calling an emergency line versus our regular business line. And so you can have as many of these set up as you want. Once we've created our hours of operation, so in here, if we look at my after-hours call, I've defined my after-hours services. I can have a separate one set up, let's say, for weekends. And I've defined the time period in which, if a caller calls into our office during these times, it'll choose one of our workflows in the system. And again, in here, if we look at our regular business hours, you can see I've defined that in the system as well. And once we've set this up, our next section in here is going to ask us to create attendant inputs. And in essence, what this is creating for us is what is going to prompt our caller as to what steps they need to take to either get to a live person, or what information do we need to gather before a live person answers in our office. And there is no right or wrong configuration here. What we give you the ability to do is, as I come in here, I can add additional inputs that as soon as the caller is received prior to that greeting message, I can prompt them to enter specific information. Like, if you want to talk to a live agent, press 1. If you're calling about an existing job, press 2. If you're calling for our collections department, press 3. And in here, this can be either a digital input where we prompt the user to either put a key in on their phone, like a number or letter combination. This can also help us that when we're entering this information, if this pertains to details that we would normally have to fill in on, let's say, an intake form, like type of loss or name, you can actually have them prompt that on the phone if you want to capture that information before we take the phone call. And again, all of these things are optional. Once prompted, we can then have a series of workflows underneath that prompt that then gives the customer additional options, or directly transfers to a live person, so we can minimize the touch points that are set up on this caller intake process. This can also allow for things like speech input, where I can talk into my device and say, operator, or connect me to a live agent. And I can also be forwarded to things like voicemail or transferred to someone within our organization, like a specific phone number. We can also set timeouts on these messages where if the user does not prompt in a specific amount of time, it can just immediately connect them to a live person, or it can ask to repeat the question again. In here, what we want to make sure is that the workflow is set up to create a meaningful customer experience. And we want to make sure that through this workflow, we're not losing any calls or people are getting frustrated before they reach a live person. And part of the setup that we go through for your organization will allow our team to help set up this workflow initially and test it out with your office before we launch it live for your customers to call in. Now, once we've defined our hours of operation and our inputs, we can then go and decide which numbers we want to connect to this line. Again, depending on the numbers we have available in here, I may want to forward to an after-hours service. I may want to connect our regular line to our intake coordinator or our dispatch person. And so this allows us to define what numbers we're going to allocate to those different call-in operators. And we can set up different ring groups in the system to contact different agents within our organization. The last piece we want to take a look at is our service regions. And again, in the system, those of you who are familiar with how the CRM works, service regions are a lot like setting up regions in the CRM. The difference is that these are suggested service areas that we can have connected to. And when we drill into our Jacksonville service region, we want to make sure that we've defined the stipulations as to what makes up this service region within our office. Again, the bearing of what is important about this service region is that once we've defined the different areas that we want to connect to, I can add those to my list. And during the intake process, the system will actually suggest, if we have multiple areas or service regions, whether the caller that is calling in is part of that service region or not. And again, this allows us to either have a single service region or multiple service regions. And even if we're coming in here and we're connecting multiple offices to our call center, this will allow us to determine service regions for each of our office locations. Now, once we have this defined, the next section that we want to take a look at in the system has to pertain to our employee setup. So we talked about our attendance setup and we talked about our company setup. Now that these are defined, we want to make sure that we can have our employees connected into the system to now answer these calls. And so we're going to take a look at the employee setup in the system. And it really takes a look at two main areas for our agent setup. So jumping back into our system, I'm going to navigate to my user here at the top. And as I click this panel here, it allows me to go into our user details. Now, unlike a CRM user, there's a couple additional options we've provided for our call agent. In here, if we take a look at the call agent screen, a lot of this information looks pretty similar to what you would see as a CRM user in our office. As I come down here to the bottom, you'll now see a new section called Is Call Agent and Call Center Phone. This allows us to determine that if I'm not receiving the call from my computer, I can actually forward this call to a cell phone, a landline, or another number that my call agent can actually intercept this call. Once our system has taken it, it'll forward it to the appropriate call agent in our system. In here, once we have that call agent set up, the only additional options that we want to take a look at is the upload avatar, which is similar to our CRM user, which allows us to put a icon or picture of our call agent, which will then update in the CRM. And a feature that is specific to our call agents is whether or not our call agent is available to take calls in the system or not. And this can again be toggled whether we're logged into the system or logged off, that calls are not going to be coming to this call agent unless I'm listed as online and available to take that call within our office. In here, once I'm set up and live, I should be able to take new incoming calls within the system. The other piece that we're going to take a look at actually pertains to our job management side. And from the employee's perspective, being able to list an employee as somebody who is on call or available to take calls after hours. Now, this is something that you'll be able to find on the job management side. And if we just navigate really quickly over to our job management system, I'm just going to come in here onto our contact side and just pull up one of our employees. In here, when I select my employee in the system, you'll see that there's now a new employee type that we can choose from, which we call on call. And this will allow me that once I've added this to our system, I'll now be able to select that person to either send text messages to or phone calls to based on the contact info that they have listed in the system. We'll want to make sure that their mobile number and their email address have been clearly defined in the system in order for them to receive this information from the call center. Once we've set this up, I should now be able to come in here and assign this work to our call technician or after hours person. Now, at this point, I've asked Christy to kind of act as our policyholder in the system. And I'm going to have Christy call in to our call center, and I'm going to be both the call agent as well as our technician that's going to be going out and doing the loss. So that being said, I'm just going to switch back over to my call perspective, and I'm going to shrink this screen down just ever so slightly so that you can now see both my phone as well as the call center application. Now, Christy, if you would be so kind as to give me a call with a new loss that we can now put into our system. Now, as Christy is calling into the system, it is going to prompt her whether or not this is a new job or an existing job based on the workflow that I have set up. But as soon as our call comes into the system, I'll be able to see the prompt on my screen identifying the user and the number that they're calling from. Now, at this point, now that I've accepted the call, it's going to forward to my cell phone. And as any good call technician knows, I'm going to answer it appropriately. Thank you for calling Restoration Company Co. Ryan Pritchard speaking. How can I help you? I am fantastic. How are you today? Okay, can I just get your name really quickly before we get started? Okay, Christy. Now, in here, it looks like I've found your name in our system. Have we done work for you before? Okay, perfect. What can I help you with today? Oh no, that's terrible. Let me see if I can take your loss down and get someone to come out and take a look at that for you. Now, are you guys still on 9117 Woodsman Cove in Jacksonville? It looks like I found a location here that will be close to your servicing area. Let me just see if I have somebody on call that can come over. It looks like we have Bob that's available to take this. Let me just send him a quick alert to see if he can come over and do this morning. All right, it looks like he's available. Can I just get a couple additional details? You mentioned that you had a master bedroom overflow because of a toilet leak. Oh boy. And before I just send someone out there, do you mind if I ask how you guys heard about us? Oh, okay. Let me just see in here. Okay, perfect. All right, well, it looks like I have everything set up. Let me go send this over to our dispatcher, and I'll have someone over to your house early this morning to take a look at that leak for you. Perfect. Thanks so much for your time, Christy, and I'll get someone to look at this right away for you. All right, so now that we have our call set up in the system, I can hit save and dispatch. And this is going to create our job for us in the job management side. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump directly over into the job management system and take a look at the job that we've created. Now, at this point in time, now that I have our job created, I should be able to come into my mobile app and send this over to our technician to take a look at. In here, I'm just going to pull up our job list. I'm going to grab our Christie job, and I'm going to come in here and hit Start Travel. Now, as it prompts me to go and send this to our customer, again, the details that I've captured over on the mobile side allow us to immediately send this notification to the customer just based on the cell phone number that I grabbed coming into the system. Now, what I probably should have asked is that the mobile number that Christy wanted to use in order to receive alerts, but it's my first day. In here, once we get that notification sent out to the customer then can send us a message if there's anything they want to let us know about, for instance, like a dog in the backyard or something that they have to get ready for us to then send back into the system. In here, I'll receive a customer message back from Christy if there's anything that we need to update in the system. In here, by clicking this, it will give Christy the ability to see where I'm located in conjunction with the job site, which unfortunately we're nowhere near each other, but will allow me to come in here and actually see our text messaging that will allow us to now go in and communicate directly with our customer back and forth via text message to have this information go back into our job as a log note. And if I jump into our log notes tab, you'll already see the messages and alerts that have been coming from Christy that are now going back and forth between our technician and our customer, allowing us to identify and notify the audit trail in case there's any dispute on what's happened. Jumping back into our call center, we'll now be able to come in here and start to take a look at the analytics that come along with the calls that are coming into the system. In addition to being able to see our live agents and how much time they're spending on individual phone calls, this also gives me the ability to take a look at all the calls that have come in this morning, this week, or month, and which of them have actually been created as jobs in the system. In addition to this, our call log will now allow us to take a look at this information, knowing what the user prompted in the system, how many steps it took them to get to our live agent, and ultimately recorded our conversation as well.
Thank you for calling Restoration Company Co. Ryan Fisher speaking. How can I help you?
Hi, Ryan. How are you today?
These files will now be saved as an MP4 file against our customer record. So in case we have to go back and listen to those phone conversations again, I'll have detailed audit trails for every phone call, both coming and going, that hits our system. And as I mentioned, this doesn't prevent me from being able to call out of the system. So I can now start to come in here and look at our call history from our agent's perspective to see what phone calls that agent has made from our system, both outbound and which ones they've taken, if we're going to be reviewing individual agents within the system. Now, in here, this also allows us, again, to connect our details between the job management, CRM, and on-site application, so the information will pass seamlessly between all of these fronts. All of this information is now recorded as part of our detailed audit trail. So whether this information is presented through the call center dashboard as far as the call intake and dispatch, or whether we're going on to our job to take a look at the details that were recorded by this conversation, or even the job audit to see what information has been added or changed within this job file, all of this now is recorded through one seamless workflow experience. Now, I know I didn't leave a ton of time for questions, but for those of you that have questions on the call center intake and dispatch process, I'll open it up to the floor now for any sort of Q&A. And we'll try and answer as many questions as we can within the next 3 to 5 minutes. I'll know I don't have anything happening after this. So for those additional questions, you can also reach out to us directly, either through our sales or support lines, to ask additional questions through the system. And I'd be remiss without telling you that if you haven't signed up yet for our user conference is coming up April 10th to the 12th in Dallas. And we're going to be covering everything from the call center intake to new changes from job management and accounting. And so we encourage everybody who's not yet signed up to go to our website and take a look at the agenda. We now have our first question. Taylor asks, when assigning an on-call technician, can this also create a schedule within PJM asking for a scheduled work order and a clock in and out process? It is possible, but today this is not mandating any sort of scheduled appointment. So from a standpoint of the call intake process happening, us then passing that call to the individual, currently it's not generating a scheduled appointment to reflect that. But I do think it's a good idea to also apply that to our audit trail process so that we know when somebody was scheduled, that we can also look at the schedule and avoid double booking them. The next question is, can you email this recording and the one for yesterday? So unfortunately, the size of these recordings cannot come via email. However, if you go onto our YouTube channel, you can see all of the Lunch and Learn and webinar recordings that we've done previously. And if you can't find one or you need access to a specific learning session, just reach out to our training and support team, and they'll make sure that they can send the link directly to you. Any other questions before we wrap up our session for today on the call center intake and dispatch processing? Make it easy. Is there an additional cost for this feature? Yes. So as far as the call center, it's not going to be based on users or agents, but rather the call intake process itself. So from a standpoint of incoming calls, any calls that hit our system, there'd be $1 charge for the incoming call, and any charge that turns into a job, it would be a $10 charge for that call to then be transferred into the proven job system. So it's based on a call/file intake process based on those charges. Can we use the call log feature with our own RingCentral? Again, I'll probably have to look into this from a support and technical perspective, but the call would need to either be routed through your RingCentral number to hit our Twilio number. So it is possible, but without seeing how that system is set up, I can't give you an answer for sure, but it's certainly something I can look into for you. The next question is, how do we get access to the CRM? So if you do not currently have access or subscribe to the CRM, you can just reach out to our support center, and they can certainly either help you get set up or transfer you to one of our sales reps to assist you on the onboarding process of Proven CRM. Our next question is, any plan on including chat through this process that we could add to our website as an emote versus just phone calls? So currently, we don't have any plans for a website chatbot, although I know there's a lot of services out there that offer that as a native functionality. We can certainly take a look at that. Again, our challenge would be with the generic chatbot is we would need to have some way of linking that chat either back to a job file or to a customer that exists in your database. Otherwise, we have nowhere to store just generic chats or random questions in our system. But certainly something we can take a look at. All right, well, that looks like it does it for our Lunch and Learn for today. Time flies when you're having fun. I'll wrap up this session. If there is any additional questions that we didn't have a chance to answer, you can always reach out to us via email or phone. And we look forward to hearing from you. And hopefully we can bring your team on board with the new proven call center application in the near future. Thanks, guys, for your time, and have a fantastic rest of your day.